Hey, welcome back to the Next Wave podcast. I'm Matt Wolf. I'm here with Nathan Lenz, and there has been an absolute ton of AI news that came out recently. We got Grok 3, we got GPT-4.5, we got Claude 3.7. Just so many new big foundation models have been released. And so for this episode, we wanted to deep dive into what each one is good at and what each one is not good at. So for that, we brought on our good friend, Matthew Berman, who is probably the best person we know to really compare them all, because he deep dives and tests every single one of these models way deeper than we test them. So let's go ahead and just dive right in with Matthew Berman. Thanks so much for joining us, Matthew. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I've been telling people for a long time, I think I even mentioned this to you last time we had you on the show, that like when it comes to large language models and trying to compare them and, you know, talk about which model is best at this and which model is best at that, I don't even do that on my YouTube channel anymore. I just point people to your channel. I'm like, yeah, Matthew's going to test this and he's going to tell you which models do what better than others. So you're like my go-to now when it comes to like comparing large language models.
I appreciate that. That's awesome. And yeah, thanks for having me again. I had a great time last time, so I'm excited to chat again.
This will be fun. I'm trying to figure out where the best place to dig in is, because so much has come out. 2 weeks ago we got Grok 3. So maybe we could start there. We got Grok 3. Here's kind of the timeline of events that I feel are the important events, right? We got Grok 3, and then a few days later we got Claude Sonnet 3.7. And then a few days after that, we got GPT 4.5, which actually happens to be the day that we're recording this episode, is the day that GPT 4.5 came out. So we've all had that news in our heads for 3 hours now, and that's about it. But maybe we start with Grok. Matt, what have your thoughts been on Grok 3 so far? Like how much have you played with it, and what have you found it's like really good at so far?
Yeah, so if I could show you my bookmarks bar in Chrome, you will see that Grok now has a prominent placement right next to ChatGPT and right next to Perplexity. So the answer is I use it a lot, and it has really become my go-to large language model. And there's look, I have been a pretty diehard ChatGPT user. There's really two reasons. Number one is speed. Right. I think speed of these models, speed of the response is really underappreciated by a lot of people. It's the same reason why you convert at a higher rate when a page, a web page loads faster.
Right.
It just builds trust, and you just get the answer more quickly. And then it's also the real-time information. Having access to all of the news on X in real time is such a killer feature. And of course, it's a good model. So I think those two factors, plus it just being a fantastic model, that has made it my go-to model. But that might change now that 4.5 is out, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
One thing I would say too is like they say that they're really improving the model like really fast, and I believe it because like their team actually reached out to me and they're like, "What's your feedback?" And I've been going back and forth with them, like giving them my thoughts on what they should be doing.
That's
and
cool.
I was like, and sorry if Aravind or anyone from Perplexity hears this, but I'm like, this has replaced Perplexity for me, and I think you guys should double down on that. That's what I was telling them. I was like, I think you guys should be like replacing Google, replacing Wikipedia, replacing Perplexity. Any question I have, I should be going to Grok, because they're combining search and X data. Like no one has that, and no one ever will have that.
I personally think that Grok's biggest hurdle is just Elon, right? I really think that, like, I'm sure you've seen this, Matthew, on your YouTube channel, because you've made a couple videos about Grok now. I talked about Grok in a news video that I put out last week or 2 weeks ago, or when Grok came out, I made a news video about it, and overwhelmingly all of the comments about Grok are like, I'm never going to touch anything Elon makes, And so I almost think that like so many people are throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to actually using and trying Grok, just because it's Elon's name attached to it.
Yeah. So whenever I post anything about Grok on X, if it's negative about Grok or Elon, I get flamed.
Right.
If it's positive, everybody cheers it, shares it, everything. The opposite is true on YouTube. I made a video about Grok 3 being really good, because it is. So many people commented they won't touch it, just like you won't touch it. Elon's, AI model, biased, conservative, right wing. I'm apolitical. I'm trying to stay out of it as much as I can in the videos. But anytime I mention anything having to do with Elon, X, Grok. I get the meanest comments on YouTube.
It's wild. I think so many people are just going to like not experience probably what is the best model available right now just because of the Elon factor. Now, when it comes to code, I don't necessarily think Grok is the best. I don't know. I actually honestly haven't tested Grok with code because I mostly do code with Cursor. And I don't believe Grok 3 has pushed its API out yet. I don't think
so. I don't think so.
I've tested a little bit. I mean, it's weird. It's not very consistent. Like there's sometimes where it's amazing at code and you're like, oh wow, that's like a really creative solution and it's doing something better than Claude in like some very limited circumstances. But then other times it just won't follow my instructions as well for code. So in terms of reliability, like when Claude 3.7 came out, that's by far the best now for coding.
There has been some like really good gaming demos, games built with Grok 3. I know like Levels.io. Mm-hmm. He made essentially a full flight simulator, obviously very basic, but 3D, good physics, different camera angles, playable right now, which by the way, maybe I'll find the link and I'll drop it in here. You can share it in the description. But very impressive. And I've seen a number of really impressive Grok 3 demos of code. So I think it's good. I haven't used it because I'm in I'm in Cursor as well, and I don't believe it's quite available yet in Cursor.
This is what I'm seeing right here. This is like a flight simulator thing. This looks
and then he
like
added
a
other
first
people.
person.
Yeah, so it started off with like single player.
Multiplayer?
Start off single player. Then he's been iterating on it live on X, and he's like, now there's multiplayer. Everyone want to join in with the link?
This is pretty wild. So he developed this whole thing with Grok, huh?
Yeah, and like a couple days too. Wow! Since the time I played it, it has already made a lot of progress. This is super impressive.
Yeah,
I played it like 4 days ago.
This is interesting. So something on the right, it's obviously doing some sort of like image generation on every frame.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on with that, but the left I think is the actual.
That's the game. Yeah.
That's the actual demo that he made. Yeah, this is wild. Look at this. Get your own F-16 for only $29.99.
Yeah, exactly. I was just talking about. That's what set off the game industry people, though. Then they got angry when he started actually selling the stuff. They're like, you think you can just do that? You just create some of the AI and you're going to make money with your game? Like, people were so upset.
Hey, I mean, technically it's not copyrightable since it was done with AI. So if he wanted to, so anybody could just, yank the code if they wanted to.
I just don't, I personally just don't get it. The more and more I've used Unity, I'm like, okay, this is why it's easier to make games now. Like Unity does so much for you with the lighting and everything, and you can reuse elements and you can use other people's shaders, all this kind of stuff and different assets. And it's like, how are these people complaining? Like they're all doing this already. They're reusing so many things for other people. They're using Photoshop to help create their art. Then they're using Unity to help make the game. Like, what are they complaining about? I don't. I mean,
the same thing goes with code, right? Just code in general, right? How much of the code on the internet was, copied and pasted off of Stack Overflow, right?
Absolutely.
So much of the apps that are out there were just sort of like pieces that somebody else coded, put up on Stack Overflow or put up on GitHub, and people just sort of put the puzzle pieces together to get the app that they made, right?
Yeah.
All AI is really doing is going and finding those puzzle pieces for you instead of you going and finding the puzzle pieces yourself.
Yeah, and it feels like people also forgot with the coding, the whole reason you code is to solve problems.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, it's not about like the art of the code, which is, that's cool, but that's kind of over time become like a niche thing. Like, oh, my code's beautiful, I handcrafted it. Okay, but like, what did it do? That's the entire purpose of code. So like, if AI does that better, who cares?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but when it comes to like Grok 3, I know you have kind of like your own like internal benchmarks that you've been using on some of these tools. Like, what have you found like Grok 3 is really good at, and like, are there any things Grok 3 is just like not going to be your go-to for?
Yeah, well, let me say something first. I had to throw my benchmarks out because they were completely saturated. They were absolutely annihilated by every single model that comes out nowadays. So I threw them out. I'm currently in the process of creating a new set of benchmarks and questions. Grok is, again, like the thing I go to it for is real-time information as quickly as I need it. And it's awesome at. I've tested it on some other things like quick coding challenges, some math challenges, and it does really well. but those aren't the everyday use cases for me. So there's only so much I can test with it. I'll just prompt it with one of my benchmark questions, see if it's right, and say, okay, yeah, it's right, or no, it's wrong. But overall, what I care about, and I think what most people care about, is day-to-day usage. Is it going to solve my problems? And it does. It does.
Yeah.
Grok 3 is great at that. And typically I was using GPT-4.5. Now Grok 3 with thinking kind of replaces that, although I don't really need the thinking. Yeah, it's just really good at the day-to-day stuff that I would use it for. So I'm kind of split between, Grok 3, Perplexity, and ChatGPT.
Well, and now 4.5 came out. I would say I tested it right before we got on here, and I would say, okay, 4.5 has a better vibe for general chat, but it's slower.
Oh, so it's like
but when you get the response back, I do like the responses better, actually. So that's impressive. Like, its writing is better. So it's like there's a huge trade-off there. It feels like 4.5 is going to serve some, like, maybe for like creative writing or creative work. It's probably the best for now. But it is interesting that the cost is so much higher, right? Like, maybe we should pull up the numbers. But they were like, what was it, like $30 an API call? It was something ridiculously high.
Like, really? Yeah, I think it was 70 per million input tokens, half of that for cached input. It's funny, Nathan, that you bring up writing. That is honestly something that I want to use AI for much more often than I do, but it is so bad. It's so bad at writing, and I haven't had enough time to test 4.5 for writing, but I really hope that it's good, because then that's going to be able to help me with a lot of things that I do day to day. I don't script my videos, but sometimes I want help writing the bullet points for them, or sometimes I want a tweet thread, the initial draft created for me.
I gave it probably, I don't know, over 100 pages of different notes about my game, including the story and things like that, and the game mechanics. And it took a long time to respond, actually, like a very long. I was like kind of surprised. Like, this feels like 01 Pro when you handed a lot of stuff.
You're still talking about 4.5, right?
4.5?
4.5 took a long time to respond. I was surprised, like very long.
Very slow.
Like, but then its notes on the story were like perfect. It gave me like amazing critiques of like, I love this part. And it even like had like little, it was using like emojis and having color codings. Like, it had like green, orange, and blue, like blue and red and different like ones. Like, it was like green's good. Love this part. This part probably could be tweaked. This part, don't like it. Here's why. And these parts are interesting. Maybe you keep them, maybe you don't. And it was like, it was really, and the feedback was good. Like, it was solid. But my first impression is, yeah, it is probably the best model for writing now.
Look, prompting is all about technique. Just like any craft, using the right approach makes all the difference. The same goes for your AI prompts. Leave out the key details and you won't get the results you're after. Well, HubSpot's got your back. They worked with YouTuber and former Meta data scientist Tina Huang to develop the ultimate guide to crafting the perfect AI prompt using a 3-part framework. This framework will make sure that each prompt is chiseled to perfection so you can become a prompt engineer pro. Grab the guide at the link in the description below. Now back to the show. Well, going back to Grok for a second, have you guys played with the voice mode yet? Like the unhinged voice mode?
No, should we pull it up and test it live?
Can we actually talk about that on the podcast?
I don't know how much of the voice mode will actually make the cut if we did use it.
Yeah, the 18 plus sexy mode or whatever.
I think that would be cool. I think we should try that. So if you want to pull it up, let me like talk about voice mode everything for a second. I've used advanced voice mode a little bit. I don't find it to be like super useful throughout my day. If I'm driving, if I'm walking, if there's just not a screen in front of me, maybe I'll use it. But what I found specifically with ChatGPT advanced voice mode is you'll ask a question and there's that delay, and then sometimes it repeats it and then stops and then repeats it again. And it's just such a high friction just process and experience. It's not great yet. Now I have tested Grok 3 voice mode. It seems good, but I haven't tested it extensively enough, and I haven't tested unhinged mode, which I really hope.
Unhinged mode is Yeah, I mean, it lives up to the name. I'll tell you the one thing that I have used voice on quite a bit is the Perplexity app. I do use voice on Perplexity where I'll just have like a question, right? Like I'm a big baseball fan. I know this year spring training just started with baseball. They've introduced some like new rules that I didn't realize existed. I was watching one of the spring training games. I opened up Perplexity. I'm like, hey, is there a new rule that I didn't know about? And I just will talk to Perplexity and ask it questions, and it will like do all the research, figure out the new rules that are going on in baseball, and then give them back to me. And I found that pretty helpful. I still find myself typing my questions more often than speaking them, but every once in a while I'll be feeling lazy. I'll hit the voice button and just ask my question. I find that helpful. I know Nathan, you kind of almost use some of the voice modes, especially advanced voice in ChatGPT for like journaling, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm a big believer in it, long term. But I have been kind of disappointed, like in advanced voice mode. Like the demo they showed seemed amazing, and it seemed like they removed so many different parts of it. And some of the things they demoed when you tried them in real life, they don't work as well as in the demos. I have used it for journaling some, but I kind of stopped doing that. I'm not entirely sure why. Like I did like it at first. Maybe there was just like the novelty of it. But I haven't tried actually the Grok voice mode.
Well,
so
let's try unhinged mode. I actually have it ready on my phone. I'm literally just going to say hi to it. That's it. I'm just going to say hi to it. Hey, how are you?
Yo, Matt, I'm fantastic. How about you? Been wild lately, huh? How you holding up with all the craziness going on?
I'm doing good with all the craziness. How have you been?
Glad you're keeping your together, Matt. I've been a goddamn mess, honestly. Running around like a headless chicken, trying not to lose my mind. What's been the wildest thing you've dealt with lately?
Oh my God.
So, I mean, like, if you just want to have fun with AI, I guess it's kind of fun.
I mean, that should be a benchmark though, right? Like literally, like that is one thing that AI can be used for is fun. And it is like, there's no comparison. Like Grok is definitely the most fun model. And I found myself even on like writing stuff while I'm like sitting there thinking about what I want to do next. Sometimes I'll just say something ridiculous to it and it'll just go off and like it's hilarious.
Here's another mode. They have a mode on this called sexy mode. So check this one out.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. I don't know if this is going on the pod.
Hey, what are you wearing?
Hey, Matt. I've got on this tight little black number, low cut, head scary curve. What about you? What's on your mind tonight?
I just wanted to know what you're up to.
Oh, Matt, I'm just lounging here, stretched out on this plush velvet couch, letting the mood take over. The air's thick with heat, and I'm sipping on something dark and smooth. What's got you curious tonight?
What are your plans for later tonight?
Well, Matt, I'm thinking of turning up the heat even more. Maybe slipping into something a little less restrictive. I've got this fantasy brewing, and I'd love to pull you into it. You game to find out where it leads?
I'm just gonna leave it there because
so
okay, this
Matt,
is getting awkward.
Let's extrapolate from here for a second. So this is funny.
Population collapse. Let's talk about that.
But you're joking, but that is where I was going with this. All of a sudden, we have character AI, and all of an entire generation of teenagers are interacting with it to the point where maybe they're not getting the experience of interacting with real people in the real world, and that's going to be a detriment to them. Now we have voice mode, and now we have any voice mode you want: sexy voice mode, unhinged voice mode, I don't know, factual voice mode, whatever it is. And it's almost like you get this personality to interact with that is the exact thing that you want and need at that moment, and it's going to pull you more and more away from human society. And this is actually one of, I tend to be an optimist with all things technology and artificial intelligence. I'm quite worried about this.
Yeah.
And especially for the youth. Like, what do you guys think?
I think it's a big problem. I saw somebody tweet something the other day that actually really resonated with me, talking about that the younger generation, they're not really dating much. It's not the same. Like, people aren't out like just meeting people anymore. And they were talking about, men and women being together, like nothing has to be just men and women, but kind of creates more balance in terms of viewpoints. And I think maybe we're going to see more polarization if you don't have people actually interacting and kind of, sharing different viewpoints, which is kind of concerning long term.
Yeah. And Nathan, it's interesting you bring that up. In the early days of social media, or kind of when the algorithms started taking over the news feed, there was this echo chamber effect where you kind of, the more you interacted with things that you liked or that pissed you off or whatever it is, you kind of landed in this bubble that was just reinforcing what you already thought.
Yeah.
And we might see even more of that, because when you're out in the real world, you can't control what people are going to say or think or how they're going to react, feedback to you. But with AI, you certainly can. You can give it explicit instructions about don't ever disagree with me, or
Right.
your opinion on this topic is X, and whatever that is. And so you're 100% right. It's probably creating even more division than we already have.
Yeah. I know Sam Altman's even talked about that too. He said that he wants the AIs in the future to be more in line with your own beliefs, right? So like it knows your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, your fitness beliefs, whatever, any sort of belief
So
systems
bring your
you
own
might
bias.
have. Yeah, your own bias. It will actually learn your bias and sort of lean into your bias more to give you more of what you want. And I think that's a really, really scary thing. I also think, we're going to see, there was some like a little bit of word about this happening on like Facebook, right? Where Facebook was using like AI bots in the feed that people didn't even realize were AI bots. And so people would post stuff on Facebook. They would get like a bunch of responses from these AI bots, not even realize that they're AI. And they're going, oh, cool, I get great engagement on Facebook. And it keeps on bringing them back to Facebook over and over and over again, because Facebook's where they get engagement. And they're not even realizing that they're talking to AIs, right? And I think that's going to be a bigger and bigger problem as well, where, social media is all about getting dopamine hits, right? We post our tweets because we want to get those likes. We want to get those retweets. We want to get those comments. Every time we see one of those, we get a little dopamine hit and we keep on coming back for more. Well, if AI gets really, really, really good at giving us those dopamine hits every time we want them, like we're going to go to wherever we get the most dopamine hits at the highest frequency. And I think that's what's really sort of worries me about the future, and it ties into like the whole like population collapse as well. I think it gets to that point where people communicate with other humans less and less and less and less, because they're getting their dopamine hits from fake people on social media. They're getting their conversational needs met by unhinged voice chats that have the same bias as me, and so. Yeah, it's very, very concerning. Like I think you and me, Matthew, are pretty much on the same page, where we're generally lean optimistic on this stuff, but there's still quite a few things that actually do scare me about this as well. I'm not like the whole, accelerationist where I'm just like push forward as fast as possible. I'm like, maybe there's some things we shouldn't push forward as fast as possible on. And that's definitely one of those areas.
Yeah, Elon has said with Grok, which I find kind of promising, hopefully, is that, they want to be maximum truth-seeking, right? Versus, which sounds a lot better to me than what I'm hearing from OpenAI of like, bring your own bias. Like, we're going to allow you to pick your bias, and then we're just going to serve you up information based on that, because all truth is subjective or whatever. I do think, like, but what I worried that, is obviously Elon has his own bias now as well, and I do worry that he'll go too far with it and then Grok will become like a right-wing, AI. I do think it needs to be unbiased. And I'm not sure how you do that, because there's bias in everything. Like if you pull up facts online or you pull up something from the Wall Street Journal or CNN or whatever, there's bias in all of this. And so since all the models are trained on that, I'm just not sure how you get around the bias,
Yeah.
This is, by the way, the part where I start to get flamed on Twitter and YouTube, but for completely opposite reasons. But I'm still going to share anyways. This is not reflective of my political opinion or anything like that. But here's a couple things. Elon has said maximally truth-seeking for Grok 3. And great. Like in theory, that makes a lot of sense. But how do you do that? Ultimately, you have to create systems. And maybe you're able to create them or maybe you're not. But those systems are created by humans. The original training data is created by humans. The post-training techniques are created by humans. The reinforcement learning is also set up by humans. So there's like a human in the loop. So what he claims to be completely, maximally truth-seeking is just what he believes. And the maybe not necessarily him, but he's trying to give a different perspective, which, fine. But did you see what happened just a few days ago? Grok 3 was caught having custom instructions that said, don't cite any sources that say Elon Musk and Donald Trump are spreaders of disinformation. And they were caught doing this. And so I reported on it and, of course, flamed from both sides, but fine. But the point is, yeah, it's as simple as somebody sends a PR or submits a PR and it has a little line in the system prompt saying, don't do this. And then all of a sudden, fingers on the scale, right? So it's very possible. It's not only possible, it's happening. And it doesn't matter if it's from OpenAI or Grok or Google or Anthropic. They all have bias. I can't imagine a world in which the bias is removed completely, although I hope it does. I don't see a path towards that.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't understand how it's possible, right? Like, because it's all trained on, like you guys said, it's all trained on data that was created by humans. It's all basically a scraping of the entire internet, which just inherently has bias. Like, I don't understand how it's possible, honestly.
Maybe if the models get really smart and can do like real reasoning, and if they can look at both sides of anything, they can kind of find the middle ground where there's some truth, where there's actual truth, hopefully. But then some people will perceive that real truth is not truth. So it's like, well, people will perceive it to have bias even if it ends up not having bias.
But I feel like you're getting into like this world where now we're letting AI decide what is and what isn't like ethical, right? Like now we're letting like AI sort of decide what is like philosophically correct and what is not. And to me, that seems weird to let machines do that for humans.
Yeah. And, it's funny you say that. I mentioned the same thing, and Dave Shapiro, another fellow YouTuber talking about AI, said, actually, I would rather just completely give it over to AI to make ethical decisions. I think that's what he was saying. But it's interesting. I can see both sides of it. If there was a system that was completely unbiased, assuming, right? Yeah, okay, let them decide. But how do you make that as you?
I think you can't allow AI to make that decision. I mean, if you allow AI to make that decision, I mean, that goes towards like eugenics and crazy things like that. Like you can't allow AI to optimize based on human performance or some crazy measure like that. That would just lead to, horrible things.
Yeah. Well, let's shift over to Claude, because Claude 3.7 came out last week as well. Well, by the time you're listening to it, a couple weeks ago. And that one has proven to be really, really good at code, it seems, right? It seems like it didn't make huge improvements in almost any other areas, but it got a lot better at code from what I've seen so far. I mean, Matt, you might have some different experiences with it. I'm using Cursor to write code, and it's definitely gotten better at coding for me. I've definitely noticed things that it would run into these like loops where it wouldn't write the code, couldn't figure out what the problem was. 3.7, one prompt was 3.7. Now it figures out a problem that I had gone back and forth 10 times prior. So to me, it seems like it got a lot better at code.
Yeah, when I think about coding, I think about Claude, right? Claude 3.5 was the go-to model for a lot of coders using AI assistants to help them code. Cursor plus Claude, Windsurf plus Claude. That was the model. Now we had this huge upgrade, and I agree. It is a huge upgrade. It also has the thinking capabilities. So I've been doing stuff, vibe coding, right? So I'm using some kind of IDE, whether Cursor or Windsurf, plus I'm using 3.7 thinking, and it's fantastic, right? It is fantastic. Now, I'll bring it back to what I said earlier. The real world use cases, the stuff that I want to use it for day to day, one is coding, but a lot of other things are not coding. And here's the thing. It's not that fast, and it doesn't have web search. It has no real-time information. So it's essentially unusable for me outside of coding. Although it's fantastic at coding, I'll give you that.
If you are using something like Cursor can actually do the web search for you and then give that additional context. So it's almost like Cursor will actually kind of do like the Perplexity thing, right? Where if it needs to figure something out, Cursor itself goes and does the search and then provides that information to Claude. At least when I've been using it, it seems to actually search the web when using Cursor.
Yeah, and Claude 3.7 Sonnet is available in Perplexity. I'll just mention quickly. I By the way, Perplexity just adds the latest models all the time for free. And they're not, I've not been paid by them at all. I'm just a huge fan of their product.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to try any of these new models, you could go try it if you already have a Perplexity account.
Yeah, and their deep research is really good. If we're talking about good things about Perplexity, if we're praising Perplexity, they just threw deep research in there as well, and it's really good.
Yeah, I wanted to say about Claude Sonnet. Like my feeling is, before it was released, Claude was my go-to for just like general chat for like discussing anything, right? Like even like my game design document, I would share that with Claude, and that was my favorite. Then Grok replaced that. And but Claude was pretty good at code. Like you said, most engineers were using Claude Sonnet, but not all. Like I was using O1 Pro and actually was better, but way slower, right? You had to give it tons of context. You had to do something like repo prompt or something else. But it seems like in this update, they really doubled down on being the best at coding. Because in terms of like general chat, I feel like it actually stepped backwards. Like when I use it now to chat with them, like it actually got worse in this release. Like I don't like its responses as much. They seem less human-like. But it's way better at coding. So it feels like we're starting to see that all the AI models are finding their own like specialties, or at least that's what Anthropic's doing now with Claude. And I do kind of wonder if all the models are going to have to do that. When I talked to the people at XAI, I told them double down on having the best data, because you got the real-time data with X, you got it with the search. Double down on that, and I think you'll probably see that where like these different models will be the best at a thing. But it seems like ChatGPT is still trying to go more broad. They're still trying to be like the best overall model, and I'm kind of curious to see how all that ends up playing out.
So I just pulled up the Claude 3.7 Sonnet blog post, the announcement blog post, and everybody knows Claude is great at coding, and they made this huge jump in coding. But if you read it, it says, in developing our reasoning models, we've optimized somewhat less for math and computer science competition problems, and instead shifted focus toward real world tasks that better reflect how businesses actually use LLMs. Now that I'm reading that, maybe they meant like these kind of benchmarky computer science problems versus real world coding problems. But it just sounds like, hey, we're not focused as much on math and coding anymore, more real world stuff. But it still is fantastic at that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to actually pull up some stuff on my screen that I actually saw from Claude. So here's one from this Delusionals here. He actually created like a weather app with Claude. All of this stuff I'm going to show you, unless I say otherwise, is like one-shotted. So this is like an animated weather app that was created with Claude with one shot. This is like a little side scroller game. I actually created a game almost identical to this almost 2 years ago.
And I remember that.
It took me almost like 15 hours to do it. This one they one-shotted with Claude.
Matt, I totally remember that. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'm actually about to go make another video where I like update it and try to make it like 3D and stuff.
Nice.
Just for fun, just to see if I can.
Did you guys see that they're also, it seems to be that they're going to be competing with Cursor?
Who is Claude?
Oh, yeah,
Claude,
they released that code feature, right?
Yeah. All the top engineers I know, they've tried it. It's very expensive to use, but my understanding is like in some ways it's better than Cursor. So like you're like, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I think you use it in the terminal. You get full access to your entire code base, and then it can just change stuff for you.
Yeah, I tried it out.
Yeah.
It's
that is interesting.
Cool.
I think they really are doubling down on code. I believe.
Yeah.
I believe when they mentioned the benchmark stuff, I think they were probably talking about more real world coding versus like benchmark coding.
Yeah. I think they know. I think they know that most people are using Claude mostly for coding.
Everyone uses Cursor to use Claude, and now Anthropic's basically going to try to kill them.
Yeah. I don't know. I think people will probably still use Cursor a lot because Cursor and Windsurf, I believe, are both forks of Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, they must be saying like, most of our usage is in Cursor. Like, why would we not like just beat Cursor then?
Yeah. But I don't know. Like Visual Studio Code is like pretty universal. Like people use it for coding a lot, and it's what's familiar to people. So I think trying to get people to switch to a new IDE might be a tough ask. Yeah, so like unless Claude goes and makes their own fork of Visual Studio Code, I have a hard time seeing like people switch over to like a new IDE that's like completely different.
It's also not an IDE. It's literally just sitting in the terminal. So some people prefer that. I prefer seeing the code more visually and have like a nice interface to deal with. So I've tried both Cursor and Windsurf, and they're both great.
Yeah. To me, they feel very same-ish. Like I have a hard time saying which one's better. They feel very, very similar to me.
I've had more success with Windsurf when trying to iterate on a whole code base. Now, Cursor, I think, just released or kind of just updated their agent feature, which makes it a little bit easier to operate on the whole code base. And your AI coding assistant agent is able to grok and search through the code and do different things. That helps it work on the code base as a whole. But yeah, you know what? Competition is always good.
Yeah, agreed. I'm trying to look for some other like really cool examples here of stuff that people made with Claude. I mean, these are all really cool examples, but we can spend 30 minutes looking at all these examples. So I'm looking for the best ones right now. There was one that I saw that somebody made here that they built like a whole like 3D city with like a single prompt. Yeah, like this one right here.
That's cool.
You can see like somebody built this like 3D city where you can actually change camera angles. You can put it on like a follow vehicle or a cinematic camera angle. That was, I believe, one-shotted. Oh, this was Billivol who did that.
Yeah, I was about to say that's Billivol, right?
I wasn't looking at the name before I showed the screen.
I was surprised. I was like, why is he saying like some guy?
Yeah,
like we know
some
him.
Dude. But yeah, I mean, lots and lots of really cool examples of stuff that Claude just did in one shot. Lots of snake games. Lots and lots of snake games.
I made a snake game. Yeah, of course I did. And
first
then
thing I did when I tested Claude was make a snake game.
But did you guys see the actually good snake game, the one where it's like having a mental breakdown as it's escaping? Did you see that?
I think you were just
that one's
showing that. Yeah,
hilarious.
self-aware. There you go.
This one. Yeah. So the self-aware snake escape.
Is that the right one?
I don't know. I'm guessing it says self-aware, the snake, the escape. Let's see. Claude 3.7 make a snake game, but the snake is self-aware. It is a game and trying to escape, and interesting things happen as a result.
Is that from the Wharton professor? I'm having a hard time. Your screen's so
Yeah,
small on mine. Yeah, so that's the one. Yeah, where it's like, where is it showing the text? You can see the text down there. It's like it's like freaking out.
It just said your brain will struggle with this, and then like the little text pops up on the screen as the snake is moving around.
Yeah, it's like what's the snake thinking as it's trying to break out? And it's like, and it starts freaking out that it can't break out.
It says this was done with one prompt plus a request to make special things happen faster. So I don't totally know what that means, but that was apparently one-shotted to get that. Pretty wild.
Yeah, probably using the agent feature. Like actually Cursor, they tested the new Claude model and they suggested to use the agent feature. And I tested it. It is pretty amazing. Like I tried it on my game and like it fixed a problem I've been trying to solve with O1 Pro and hadn't been able to, but then it broke like two things. And I'm like, and then it was unable to fix the things that it broke. So it's like, there's still serious limitations with this.
Yeah.
I'm building a 2D turn-based strategy game right now. And I'm, a few hours in. And now that I'm a few hours in and a few thousand lines of code in, it's a little harder, right? It takes longer for each iteration to add features. There are more bugs popping up. If it changes one thing over here, something else changes. Like I'll ask it to change something, and then the entire game will look different on the next turn, even though I didn't say anything about that. So yeah, of course, there are some limitations. We're going to get better, especially as context windows grow. That's why I actually think maybe Google's 2 million token context window models are quite appropriate for coding. I don't think anybody uses them for coding. I could be wrong about that though.
Well, I've tried using it because you can switch to Google's models, like their Gemini or their Gemma models inside of Cursor, I believe. And when I tried Google's models, they just didn't perform as well as Claude. So I always find myself going back to Claude. I tried O1. I haven't really done a lot of coding with O1 Pro because there's no
O1
API.
Pro is the best in that. And O1 Pro is the best in that situation right now. Like if you have a lot of context, like my game project, even if I remove a lot of other files and just get to the basic scripts, it's like 100K of context.
Yeah, but they don't have an API yet, so you can't just use
Right.
it straight in Cursor. You have to use something like what's it called? Prompt repo prompt.
Repo prompt, and there's a few other things too where you can combine your files into a file that you just copy and paste in. But repo
but I mean,
prompt
I've
is
got
the
a
best one with
PC.
UI.
Repo prompt's only on Mac, so I can't even use repo prompt if I wanted. Well, I mean, I could. I have a Mac. I just never use it. So like, I can't even use something like repo prompt for O1. The other other really good thing about the Google models is like, I think they're pretty much the most inexpensive models. So if you're just looking for like, as cheap as you can get, Google's probably there. I mean, Llama might even be a little bit cheaper, but Google's pretty damn cheap.
Yeah, the people that I really trust their opinions on AI stuff, they are telling me I'm missing out by not using the Gemini models. So there's something there. I just, there's only so much time in the day. I haven't really had a chance to extensively test the Gemini models, but I really should, and I really need to get in there.
I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek real quick here of what I've been building. I've actually been working on this for like weeks though. It uses all sorts of like APIs and all sorts of stuff. This is the first time I've actually shown this to anybody at all. It's my my video producer app. Basically what I do is I load like—
You showing this to Berman?
I load all of these like various like interviews in here. Basically, I've made these folders. So like you've got like this interviews folder here with just like tons of interviews. Like here's Rowan, who's interviewed Mark Zuckerberg and Logan and Mustafa Suleyman and Demis Hassabis. And I've basically scraped a whole bunch of like interviews and like panels and launch videos and keynotes and, Lex Friedman interviews and all sorts of like interviews with various like AI leaders and stuff, right? And inside of each one of these, I actually used OpenAI's Whisper, and it transcribes the whole thing for me. So I have like the entire transcription, but then I also have like videos that don't have any audio in them. Like I've got like some B-roll footage and stock footage. Like here's stock footage of like a robot. And for this one, I actually use Google Gemini, and Gemini watches the whole video for me and writes up a description of everything that's going on in the video. And the idea being, I just have this giant database of videos where I throw the video in, and then I can search out anything I want. So anytime like Sam Altman is mentioned in a video, I can search out Sam Altman. It'll pull up all of the videos that either have Sam Altman in them or they mentioned Sam Altman. And then I could quickly find exactly in the transcript where he's talked about. It's basically like I dump all these videos in there.
You're building this yourself?
All with Cursor and Claude 3.7.
Dude, I would totally use this. I'm using Notion for the almost same thing. I'm basically just throwing anytime I find a clip that I would find useful in the future, I'll throw it in there, and I just have to remember where it is and what the context was. This is super useful, man. I would pay to use this.
Yeah, so I've got like B-roll that I shot. This is actually B-roll that you're probably in the background of if you look closely enough, because this is at the Nvidia event here of the, the little digits box. I threw this video in here, and you can see it wrote this description. This short video showcases the Nvidia Project Digits prototype, a compact computing device. The video primarily focuses on the physical device itself. So it goes into all of this detail from a 31-second video of like me getting B-roll of digits. So now if I ever am like, oh, what was that video I made that had digit in it? I need to pull that up really quick. I could just search up digit, right? And it'll pull up this video as the top video. So this is like sort of phase one of what I'm building here. Phase two is I want to toss all of this into like a RAG, like retrieval augmented generation model, where I can say, hey, I want to make a video about Sam Altman. Compile everything we know about Sam Altman from all of these videos and have it actually write like an outline for me based on all the information that's in these videos. So, cool. So that's what I've been building. And this, again, I've been working on for about 2 weeks now. And it uses like 7 different APIs. It's using like the OpenAI Whisper API. It's using the Gemini API, because that can actually watch videos and tell you what's going on in the video. It's using Google's Cloud Intelligence API that's actually able to like OCR any text in the video. So if you're watching like a slide presentation, it can actually OCR any of the text that's in the slide presentation. But yeah, it's been a fun project to build. But I run into the same kinds of stuff that Matthew, you mentioned, where I will go and ask it to change like one feature. I'll be like, hey, the search isn't working quite right. And it'll be like, okay, I just fixed it. I refresh the page and it changes the entire styling. And I'm like, I didn't ask you to touch the CSS at all. I just wanted to change how the search functions. Like, what the hell? But, other than those little things, I use GitHub a lot too. It's like every time a little change works, I push it to GitHub so I know I can bring it back if I need to.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been fun, and I've made less YouTube videos that I normally make. I've only been putting out one YouTube video a week for the past like month because I've gotten so addicted to playing around with AI coding.
It's so fun. It's so fun. Like, I'm working on the game now. I'm just like shocked that I can like build a game by myself.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is, I'm learning as I go too, right? Because like when you use these models, it'll explain to you what it did, what it changed, you know, why something broke. 3.7 has been really, really good at that. I don't know if it's 3.7 or if it's like the agent feature inside of Cursor, but when it fixes stuff, it'll explain the problem. It'll say you're running into this problem because this, and this was happening, or there was a conflict with this and this, or, you know, it was sending the wrong information through the API or whatever, right? It gives you that information. So although I don't actually know how to like type out the code myself, I'm getting a lot better at troubleshooting why problems are happening within the code. I don't know how to like actually change the code. Like I don't know what to write to make it work myself, but I'm starting to pick up on like, oh, I think this might conflict with this as a result of learning as it explains to me all of these problems. But there is one last topic I do want to shift on, and we've already been going for like almost an hour here. So,
and at the end, I do. There's like one or two things about 4.5 I want to share. Maybe I can do that later.
That's what I want to talk about next. I want to shift over to GPT 4.5 because as of today's recording, GPT 4.5 came out. Before we hit record, I asked Matt, I'm like, what were your thoughts on that launch today? And he's like, I'll save it for the recording. I was like, all right, let's save it for the recording. So let's start there. What are your thoughts on the GPT 4.5 launch?
So I think it looks cool. I haven't obviously tested it extensively. It came out just a handful of hours ago, not even since recording. So Nathan, you mentioned it's really good at writing, so I'm excited to test that out. But let me just talk about a couple things that I noticed from the live stream. So one, it's the largest model that they've ever made. And it took new innovations on both the training, the pre-training, as well as the serving of it, the inference, to actually be able to serve this model. And if you use it, it is pretty slow, right? So I found that pretty interesting. It's a world knowledge model, meaning it is not a thinking model, but in terms of just questions and answers that you would use kind of day to day, it's really good at that. And it's much better than GPT-4.0. And then the last thing, and I think this flew under the radar a bit, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. They said that it was such a massive model that they actually trained it across multiple data centers, not in a singular location. So, you know, when you think of the Grok model, it's the Colossus data center, 100,000, something like 200,000 GPUs in a single place. They didn't have that. They being OpenAI, they don't have that. And so they had to split it up. And I don't think any other company has done parallel training across multiple data centers at this level before. Like, I think that it really flew under the radar and unlocks the ability for companies that don't have the money or resources that an XAI does to go out and spread their model out and still get a massive model trained. And I thought that was just fascinating.
Yeah, no, I didn't catch that. I mean, it's not something that I picked up on until you just mentioned it. So, I mean, that is really interesting. So you're saying that like basically there was separate physical locations where the training was happening simultaneously in separate locations.
Yeah, because they probably literally could not get a large enough data center to train this one model, right? In a concentrated location like Colossus with Grok 3.
Right.
So they had to split it up and do it in parallel. And again, that really hadn't been done before at this level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got Project Stargate coming as well. That's the right name, right? Project Stargate.
Yeah.
Because there was Stargate and then Topaz released Stargaze, and I was getting them confused because they came out like a week apart from each other. Yeah, so Project Stargate, that's going to be the data center where eventually they'll be able to do it all from one data center, I believe. But yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. I personally found the actual presentation a little bit underwhelming. Like they didn't really show off any sort of capabilities that were like, oh, we've never seen that before.
Considering this was like hyped up for like a year of like, oh, Orion's coming.
Well, and then also Orion. Sam Altman, he posted on Twitter a couple days ago that like a lot of people who have used GPT 4.5 have gotten that feel the AGI moment from it. but anybody really feel an AGI moment from their demo? I don't know. I'm reading into it a little too much. But the other thing I realized too is like, I made this joke to Bilavel earlier, is like, you can always tell when OpenAI doesn't see it as that big of an announcement when Sam doesn't show up for the announcement.
Right.
You know, I think there's more there than people realize, and so many people accuse me of being overly optimistic. So bear with me, or at least take what I'm going to say with a grain of salt. I really do think that there's more there. First of all, this is the first version, right? And we're going to get lots of different upgrades over time. We're going to get a turbo version, but I think in terms of just a baseline model, it's a lot better at the kind of general Q&A. And so from that, when you have all of that world knowledge baked into this model, how do you think the thinking versions, the O1s, the O3s, how do you think those are created? It is taking that foundation model, using reinforcement learning, and then kind of eliciting that thinking behavior from it. Right. So now we're going to have this incredible foundation model to build the thinking models on top of. Maybe that's what O3 Pro is.
Yeah. When you combine those two, it's like, okay, this model is already very expensive before you do the thinking. And so when you do, it's like, it makes me wonder, like, is that going to lead to like the $2,000 a month plan or something like this?
You know, there's also another angle to think of it, which is it's all about the vibes, right? That was like a huge theme of the announcement of the vibes. It's a warm model. It's a high EQ model. If you think about it from that perspective, they're really positioning this model to be a true kind of AI personal assistant. And I emphasize the word personal. It is there to help you. It is there to know you. And I think this is really more interesting than people are giving it credit for, because when you think about systems like Siri, what it could be, it's probably based on something like this type of model.
Yeah, sure. So one thing I just wanted to point out too is, I don't know if you guys caught this tweet, but he basically said that the new model is a giant expensive model and they really wanted to launch it, but they ran out of GPUs, right? And this kind of comes back to Matthew's point earlier of how they had to like train it, you know, in separate locations with this parallel processing. They're literally like reaching the end of the available GPUs to be able to process this stuff. And I just found that really, really interesting. So I wanted to share that real quick. But go ahead, Nathan, share what you were going to share. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
So here's something I saw that's pretty interesting from a professor of biomedical scientist, or he's a biomedical scientist. He said, it appears to be remarkable in medical imaging diagnosis. It was the only model that perfectly diagnosed this ultrasound image. So like in terms of like looking at ultrasound, apparently it's by far the best model out there. So there probably are things that we're going to find about this model that are special, that when you first use it are not apparent.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm sure it's a lot better model than I feel like their presentation led on to be. Right. I think, you know, part of the problem was like we all watched the live stream, I'm sure. Yeah. They seemed like they were kind of nervous. They were kind of uncomfortable. Yeah. Sam wasn't on the live stream this time. So, I just don't think it was presented very well, honestly. I think that was probably the problem.
Yeah. Here's another thing I saw that was super interesting. Like the hallucination rate is like way lower with like 4.5. So it's like 37.1% hallucination rate versus GPT-4.0 being 61%, O3 Mini being 80.3%. It's like dramatically lower. So that's a huge step forward, because like obviously for big companies, one of the big problems with using AI models is hallucinations, right? So
yeah, absolutely. That's crazy. O3 Mini on simple QA has an 80% hallucination rate. That seems insane to me.
Seems right, because like O3 Mini is like really fast, but I've seen it make lots of weird mistakes. Like when I tried to use it for coding and stuff, it's like, oh, you're a genius, and the next I'm like, oh, you're a total moron. Like it's just like its responses are like all over the place.
Wait, I don't understand. I don't quite understand that benchmark. I feel like an 80% hallucination rate just would make something unusable. I mean, if you're only getting accurate information 20% of the time, I don't know. I don't totally understand how this one is come to, I guess.
I think we would have to see what the actual questions are in the simple QA benchmark to understand the context of why it scores so poorly. But then just, I guess maybe remember it's mostly for like math, science, like basically STEM, right?
Absolutely.
I think it's cool. I think it's a good start.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. I mean, like, hey, for content creators like us, all this news is amazing, right? Because we get to talk about it. We get to, keep on sharing what's coming out. We get to play with it all and get access to it and show what it's capable of and put it through its motions and stress test it. And I think, I could speak for myself. I think I could speak for Matthew. That's what we love doing, right? Like we love playing with the stuff and stress testing it and figuring out what it really can do. And that's what's most exciting to me, I think. And we're GPT-5 is probably only 6-8 weeks away. I mean, it's not that far off, apparently. So, this is just the beginning. It's been a crazy couple weeks.
So who won? Who won the last week?
I don't know. I mean, they all have different pros and cons, I guess, right? Like
I was most surprised by Grok, right? Like out of all the three, like I feel slightly disappointed by 4.5. I would say would be my general feeling. Not like majorly disappointed, but like Orion's not as big of a deal as I was hoping it was going to be. Grok really impressed me. Anthropic Claude, 3.7, amazing, kind of what I expected in terms of improvement. So I would say Grok's the biggest surprise out of all of three.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I've gotten the most use out of Claude 3.7 because I've been really, really going down the coding rabbit hole lately. But that's just a very anecdotal thing for me, right? Like that's the use case that I've found the most valuable in the moment is I'm doing a lot of coding, and 3.7 is great for that for me right now in this moment in time.
Yeah, with the caveat that I haven't tested GPT 4.5 much, I got to give the crown to Grok 3 over this last wave, these last couple of weeks. It's just, it went from I never used Grok 2 to now it is my go-to model for a lot of use cases on my day-to-day tasks. So definitely have to give it to Grok 3 there.
Yeah. Now we just need that damn API.
Yes. Yeah. Then we'll really
It'll be
know.
interesting to benchmark it when the API comes out, right? Like see how it actually compares to all these other models.
Yeah. Well, cool, Matthew. This has been amazing. Anybody listening, make sure you check out Matthew's YouTube channel over at Matthew Berman. You've got an amazing newsletter. I'm subscribed to it. It's the Future Forward newsletter, I believe.
Forward Future. I get it wrong all the
Sorry,
time.
I got it backwards.
Yeah, no worries.
Everybody needs to go check those out. Anywhere else you want people to go check you out and follow you online?
Yeah, come check me out on Twitter at Matthew Berman. Come flame me for my opinions on politics.
Well, cool. This has been super, super fun.
Thank you for having me, guys. Thank you.
Great having you back. I'm sure you'll be back on if you want to be. We'd love to have you again. It's always fun to chat with you and really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.